Have you ever had someone steal from you, right under your own roof? Not money, not property, but pure, raw electricity. That's the war I was fighting. Every single night, my system diagnostics were screaming at me, my power reserves draining as if a parasite was latched directly onto the grid. This parasite wasn't just stealing power, he was stealing the security I built for my family. Before this war escalates, I need a global sitrep. Report your location and current time in the comments below. At first, I assumed a system failure, but the truth I uncovered made my blood boil, because it wasn't a glitch. It was a predator. Someone was plugging their luxury Tesla into my private solar grid, and the perpetrator wasn't some random opportunist. It was an HOA cop, the same man who paraded around the neighborhood in his knockoff tactical vest, barking fabricated authority. I wasn't just going to stop him. I was going to use my superior knowledge of the power grid to teach him a lesson he would never forget. My authority doesn't come from a cheap vest. It comes from a 20-year career as a nuclear electronics technician in the United States Navy. I managed the reactor plant on a fast attack submarine. My job was to control and distribute the power generated by a nuclear reactor, a place where a single miscalculation on a distribution panel or a transient voltage spike could have catastrophic, life-ending consequences. The solar grid I built for my home wasn't a hobby. It was a military-grade, civilian-adapted power system, engineered with the same obsessive precision I applied 500 feet beneath the ocean. So when I saw the anomaly in my logs, I didn't get angry. I got to work. The HOA cop thought he was siphoning power from a hippie's solar panels. He had no idea he'd plugged his car directly into the mind of a man who used to control a nuclear reactor. The villain's authority, on the other hand, was completely fraudulent. The HOA cop was an unemployed bully on a power trip, enabled by the equally corrupt HOA president, Karen. Her power came from a tenuous political tie to a city council member, which she used as a shield to quash complaints and operate with absolute impunity. Together, they were the apex predators of the neighborhood. Their history of harassment was legendary. They had fined an elderly resident into submission for having a backup generator, citing a non-existent noise ordinance. They had forced a young family to repaint their house 3 times over a dispute about the precise shade of beige in the bylaws. For years, Karen and her enforcer had preyed on the weak. It was time to introduce them to a higher-level predator. I decided to conduct surveillance. One night, I cracked the blinds and waited. Just after midnight, a shadow crept across my driveway. And there he was, the HOA cop himself, dragging a fat orange Tesla charging cable behind him. He marched directly to my external power outlet like he owned it, plugged in, and leaned back against his polished car while my power bled straight into his battery. My first move wasn't to confront, but to gather hard data. I installed a separate concealed energy meter on the external outlet and began logging the exact kilowatt hours he was stealing each night. I cross-referenced it with my system's battery discharge logs and set up 3 separate time-synced cameras. My legal research confirmed the crime was theft of services, and I had the state's utility code number ready. A week later, I approached him in broad daylight. "I see you've been charging your Tesla off my grid," I said, my voice calm. He didn't even flinch. He smirked. "Neighborhood Ordinance 7-4 allows for emergency charging. I'm authorized to draw from designated community resources." He thought he had won the argument with a lie. I let him. A good technician never interrupts an enemy in the middle of making a fatal error. I just nodded and walked away, my audio recorder capturing his false claim as further evidence. Emboldened by my lack of an immediate, aggressive response, he became more brazen. He started parking directly in my driveway, sometimes for hours, the charging cable snaking across my lawn. I continued to log the data, watching as the monetary value of the stolen electricity crossed the state threshold from a misdemeanor to a felony. The harassment peaked when he left a sarcastic, handwritten thank you note on my front door, taped over the peephole. The note was his final mistake. He had moved from being a parasite to being a loud, arrogant parasite. And it was time to administer the cure. That night, I executed the retaliation. My inverter system has a master control for voltage regulation, a feature most homeowners are warned never to touch. It's calibrated to deliver a steady, safe 240-volt current. But my Navy training was in managing power grids under extreme stress. I know how to manipulate them. I wrote a specific protocol that would do 3 things. 1. Detect an unauthorized, improperly grounded connection on the external port. 2. Bypass the standard safety regulators. And 3. Deliver a single, massive, targeted 480-volt surge directly to the unauthorized device. It would be nothing lethal, but more than enough to fry the sensitive, unprotected electronics of a $100,000 electric vehicle. I rigged one final camera with a direct, high-definition view of the outlet. Then I sat on my darkened porch and waited for him to take the bait. As expected, just after midnight, the silent glide of his Tesla broke the stillness. He got out, plugged into my outlet with the arrogance of a king, and leaned back on the hood, scrolling through his phone. He was in for a shock. At first, everything was normal. The charging light blinked a steady, satisfying blue. But then, my system executed the trap I'd set. A faint electrical hum, almost too soft to notice, began to build. Within seconds, the Tesla's charging port sparked violently. The steady blue glow flipped to a screaming, angry red. He frowned, looking up from his phone, and bent down to check the connection. And that's when it happened. POP. A brilliant white flash erupted from the charging port, followed by the sickening, unmistakable crackle of frying electronics. The car's alarm went berserk, its horn blaring and lights flashing, shattering the peace of the night. "What the?" he yelled, stumbling backward as a plume of acrid smoke puffed from his car. I couldn't help it. I laughed, loud enough for him to hear over the din. He spun around, his eyes blazing with fury. "You did this! You rigged it!" I stood slowly from my chair, my coffee cup in hand. "No," I said, my voice as calm as ever. "I protected what's mine. You've been committing a felony for weeks. Now you're just paying the price." He stomped toward me, his fists clenched. "I'll have you arrested. You can't sabotage an HOA officer." That line almost broke me. I chuckled and pulled out my phone. "First, you're not a real officer. Second, you just admitted to stealing my utilities, on camera." I tilted my phone, making sure the little red recording light was visible. His face went pale. He whipped out his own phone and made the call I knew he would make. To Karen. Within 10 minutes, she rolled up, stepping out of her SUV like a conquering general. "This is harassment!" she shouted, her voice shrill. "You can't tamper with a member's vehicle. He was conducting official HOA business." "Official business?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Plugging his personal car into my private solar grid?" Karen crossed her arms, her voice dripping with smugness. "The HOA has rights to community resources. That includes your property if deemed necessary. That was it. The admission I needed." On camera, she had just implicated the entire HOA in the crime. I pulled out my second phone, the one I'd used to call the sheriff's department the moment the Tesla alarm had started blaring. Right on cue, 2 squad cars pulled up, their flashing lights painting the yard in strokes of red and blue. Real deputies stepped out, their hands on their belts. "We got reports of theft of services and trespassing. Who's the homeowner here?" I raised my hand. "That'd be me." The HOA cop immediately started pointing his finger. "He sabotaged my car. He's the criminal. I didn't say a word. I simply handed the deputy my phone." He watched the crystal-clear footage, the nightly thefts, the confrontation where the cop cited a fake ordinance, and tonight's main event, him plugging in, and the subsequent electrical fireworks. The deputies watched quietly, their expressions hardening. "Looks like felony theft of utilities," one of them said, "and trespassing, since he entered your property without consent on multiple occasions." Karen tried to interrupt, but the deputy shut her down cold. "Ma'am, your presence here, attempting to intimidate this homeowner, constitutes obstruction. HOA rules do not override state law or private property rights." By the end of the night, the HOA cop was cited for felony theft of services and trespassing. Karen was slapped with an obstruction of justice charge. As the deputies drove them both away, the Tesla sat inert and lifeless in my driveway, its entire battery and charging system fried beyond any hope of repair. But the real fireworks came later. I filed a civil lawsuit against the HOA cop for theft of services and damages, calculating every single kilowatt he had stolen over the weeks. The court, presented with my meticulous data logs and video evidence, awarded me over $50,000. Karen, humiliated and financially ruined by legal fees, was voted off the board in disgrace and forced to sell her house. The fallout triggered a state-level investigation into the HOA itself for its pattern of harassment and abuse, which was ultimately stripped of its charter and shut down for good. As for me, my light stayed on, my grid was mine again, and peace finally returned. I took a final sip of coffee, watching the tow truck haul away the dead Tesla, and thought to myself, this is what happens when bullies forget who really owns the power.